Welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is tenure. Tenure. So if you're a teacher, if you ever heard of teachers, they feel that they've reached that kind of golden plateau when you kind of like work up, your way through your ranks or whatever your probation period is, or the time where things are kind of being figured and tried out before you actually get tenure. And from what I at least remember, it can be like a few years. It might be, let's say, 2 or 3 years before you actually get tenure. And then when you're in the educational system, once you have tenure and you've like reached that point, then like you're set. Like it's almost like the whole idea of like safety and security for your job in the education profession. So needless to say, tenure is something that's a big deal or has been a big deal for some time, especially for teachers, because once they know that that job's not going to disappear, they can kind of like sit, lay back and be on cruise control. And so the official definition for tenure is the status that you're essentially granted after a trial period. So it doesn't just deal with the education system, but the education system is one example of where you hear a lot about it, especially for teachers that have been in the profession for a long time. And so again, for the education system, it's kind of like that golden key, very similar to how, for example, in the government industry, the whole idea of a clearance creates job security and safety. Because once you have a clearance, it's like, oh, well, we can only hire people that have a clearance to do this sensitive work. And if you have one, hey, great, you're in, you're a candidate. If you don't, you're not even considered. So that's another example in a different industry where a clearance may be looked at very similarly to tenure. So when you're thinking about tenure, think safety and security. They pretty much go hand in hand. When you actually have tenure in place, you have security, or supposedly you have security, and you have safety. And when you're in that mode, when you're in that mindset, you kind of don't think about the whole idea of even having to change or adapt or do anything different than what you normally do. And so this is sort of a little bit of a mindset that helps you, or helps a lot of people get in this idea of a routine. And the nice thing about routines is you know exactly what to expect. So if you're looking for predictability and knowing what the next day is going to bring, tenure kind of like helps, it helps create a foundation for that. But the challenge is that when you ever need to adapt to change, it makes it very, very difficult. Because the whole idea of tenure is that you're not supposed to change how you think. You're not supposed to change how you do things. It's follow this path, follow this road that's going to get you from where you are now to that destination that, let's say, that's going to be retirement, right? So the challenge is you're not going to be ready to adapt. And that's kind of tough, right? If you think the world's going to change and you're in a position where it's very conservative and things don't change, it's going to be difficult to adapt. And if you're not expecting the world to ever change, then it's going to be a rude awakening when things all of a sudden flip and take a change. And so why does that happen with tenure? Well, remember, tenure is a conservative system. It's not one that really is looking forward to change. It's very resistant to change. It wants things to stay the same. And politics play a big role in these environments because when you're not expecting things to change, it's really, okay, well, who's in control of this environment and what expectations or rules are they creating for this environment and how it actually runs? So when you're looking at the education system, you're looking at the folks that have tenure within their positions, essentially dictating this is how we're going to do things from this point forward. And you can see how that process doesn't really change very much, even when you have, let's say, a change in administration. In some cases it does, but for the most part, you had that conservative system, that the consistency they're actually trying to create. And so when you have change, it can create lots of challenges and problems. And so what we're going through right now with this pandemic, that is putting a lot of pressure on tenure. A lot of pressure on tenure. And, well, why do you ask? Why would that actually happen? Well, think about it. Before, tenure treated good and bad teachers exactly the same. Once you have tenure, it doesn't matter if you're good at teaching or if you're bad at teaching, you have job security. So it doesn't really motivate folks to do, let's say, much beyond. Now, some folks are naturally motivated because that's what they are. But for other folks that kind of see the system working for them, it's like, well, why do I have to do any more? Because everything's already set. I can do whatever I want, right? So that's kind of like that first big challenge. The second challenge is before, politics was used as a mechanism to control how and who education was delivered to, as well as who actually got rewarded for giving it, or the credit, let's say, for the results. And that can be very skewed, right? So if you look at the front line, you have your teachers, but above them you have various levels of management. And again, a lot of politics happen with the management you actually have in place. So that's the second challenge. The third challenge is before geography determined the type of education you could receive. So usually that's why you heard of parents trying to move their families to very good school districts. Because if you were in a good school district, you didn't have to do anything other than live there, and you got all the benefits of that education system. So whatever the schools provided in regards to the teachers, in regards to the funding for programs, after school curricular activities, all of those things, right? So all you had to do is be in the right place, and then all of a sudden everything magically happened for you, right? And I can remember that because that's the same reason, my parents moved to the school district, Abington School District, when I was younger, because it had a great school system. So that's what my parents wanted to be. They wanted me to start me into the best school system they possibly could. And then last but not least, before the physical classroom was the method of delivery. So if you look at all those four things I just mentioned, tenure having both good and bad teachers, politics playing a good big role as far as how education was delivered and who was rewarded to, geography being a determining factor of how you actually got your education, as well as the physical classroom being a method of delivery, all those things are going to be flipped on its head. Because this upcoming school year, I'm not sure where you live, but I know in my area, they are looking to have distance-based learning. And even though they haven't figured everything out for Fairfax County yet, for Loudoun County, which is our neighbor up north, they've decided that they're going to go to school 2 days a week. And the other 3 days are going to be self-paced at home in some type of homeschooling environment. That is huge, because that means parents can't outsource those responsibilities to the school system as much as they did in the past. And so that means parents are going to have to step up and figure out, what are my kids going to have to learn in order to be successful? And they're going to have to make a lot more decisions, whether either they're doing it themselves or they have to figure out who else they're going to outsource it to, because the schools aren't going to be playing as big of a role, right? So in my county, they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're not sure if school's going to be 5 days a week or 2 days a week, or, folks are actually going to homeschool. I think they're going to give a mixture of each, but they still have a lot of details to figure out. But what that means and why is that so important is teaching, I see, will become one of the most coveted professions that are out there. And there will be very little that politics can actually do to increase the momentum. So think about it. If the schools are only able to provide so much, and all of a sudden parents had to fill that gap, how are parents going to make the decision of how their children are actually learning? And how are they actually going to be receiving those results that it's actually working, right? So from my viewpoint, it's the folks that are stepping up, that are putting content online, that are sharing their ideas, that are putting together programs that children and adults alike can actually take to figure out how they're going to fill these gaps is so incredibly important, right? The schools are still trying to figure out how are they going to actually deliver education online. It's not an easy thing. You have a lot of kids, you have to keep their attention, and it's very easy for people to tune out, especially online. So the real question is, where are you going to find this engaging content where people are actually going to be learning from it, right? And the thing is, if it's not coming from the schools, where are parents actually going to decide, how are you going to sign up your kid? What are you going to sign them up for, right? And this is stuff on top of what the school would provide, right? So from my opinion, for the folks that are teaching and they're putting all their content online and they're creating programs and they're engaging folks, it's going to be a huge shift. And if you're a teacher out there and you're looking to figure out, what do I do? Because it looks like, the school system is changing. I'm not really sure if I'm going to work within that. You have to do something on top of that. And my big proposal would be, whatever it is that you love, that you have a passion for, start teaching it. The nice thing is when you start teaching things online, you can teach whatever you want to teach, right? You don't have to teach just the subjects that maybe you had to teach in school, but maybe there's something a little bit more specific that you have a niche for that you feel people actually need to learn. So you put it out there and you figure out, okay, well, who's going to tune in, and who's actually getting value from what I'm putting out there. So tenure, get ready, because you're about to be flipped on your head. And the teachers that are out there, if you're a good teacher, keep doing what you're doing and start getting your content online. And if you're a not so good teacher, you might want to come up with some other options. You need to figure out maybe what you're good at if it's not teaching. But in any case, I appreciate you tuning into this lesson about tenure. What are some of my thoughts and my ideas of how it's going to change and what's going to happen as a result to it. And this whole idea of safety and security, they exist when you create it for yourself. They don't just get handed to you. So you definitely want to create that in your life. And if you have any thoughts or any questions on that, love for you to share some of them with me. So hope you enjoyed the lesson, tenure. Hopefully you had some ideas. If you have any comments, definitely feel free to let me know. And I look forward to catching you on the next lesson. Bye.